Hello and welcome to the video. In this video we'll take a first look at this thing here. This is the Team Black Sheep Caipirinha 2 wing. Now apologies for the mispronunciation. If you know how to pronounce the name of that particular alcoholic beverage, of which is this named after, then apologies in advance, but that's how I'm going to say it for most of the video. There might be a couple of variations because I'm still working on it. I've never had one of the Team Black Sheep wings before, and I was hoping to have this 6-7 weeks ago so I could actually use it as part of the current iNav series that I'm building on the channel. Now that iNav series, we're using a ZOHD orbit wing and we're sticking F35 Lightning flight controller from Furious FPV, and we're building it out. And the idea originally with that series was to do it with this wing, but it just wasn't here in time, and TBS seemed to be really struggling to keep up with demand for this, so I finally managed to get my hands on one. And what I wanted to do in this video was kind of show you how this comes. Now this isn't a particularly cheap wing compared with lots of the other ones that I've looked at on the channel, which are well under the £100 mark. This is well above it. It's available as both a kit and kind of a PNP version as well. Now I've got the PNP version here, so it's come with everything pre-installed. We've got the motor, we've got the ESC, we've got the power distribution board, and also the folding prop as well. And it's still absolutely my intention to put in a flight controller in this flying wing and also do all the other bits and pieces with iNav. Now the flight controller I'll probably pop in this is probably going to be something like an Omnibus F4 all-in-one board, a standard MAN GPS, and we'll do it with discrete components. Because one thing this flying wing does have is loads of room to put your components in here. It's specifically designed for long-range FPV, with space for an FPV camera and also for a GoPro session style camera on the other side, with the main middle bay being completely open to take a very, very large battery to give you lovely long flight times. So let me very quickly go through the features on this thing, and then what I'd like to do is show you how it comes in the box. Again, this is the PNP version, about $250, so definitely not a cheap wing. But hopefully by watching this video you'll figure out if it's the wing for you. Then I'll go through some of the build experiences. It isn't a particularly complicated build. There is a manual now, even though it says on the website still currently that there's no manual around. There is, I'll put a link in the description. The build isn't particularly complicated, but not everything that you need is in the box. The glues and tapes and things that you need to put it together are things that you're going to get separately. And that's part of the reason why I'd say, you know what, this probably isn't the wing for a very first time builder. So in terms of the specs, it's about a 93 centimeter wingspan. All up weight's about 1.4 kilograms. That's going to be with a Session 5 and a decent sized battery as well. So it is a reasonably heavy wing, so you're going to have to practice throwing this thing from the nose pretty much straight up into the sky. Get about 90 minutes flight time with the bigger batteries. Huge endurance, and that's really what it's built around. Capacities of the batteries they're recommended for this thing is the kind of stuff that I would normally put in a big plane, something like a Zazie or one of the big Tundras. Kind of your 4500 4S to 6600 milliamp hour 4S 20C or bigger battery. Servos in this thing are digital metal geared servos. The Cobra motor at the back is a TBS branded thing. It's a 2814 1050 kV motor with a 50 amp Hobbywing Skywalker ESC. Has a 10x6 folding prop with a CNC aluminium collar at the center, and as we'll see in a minute, loads and loads of room for your electronics and some very cute ideas. Now this wing is based on the Wipeout by Happy Flyers from Switzerland. So it's a polycarbonate battery bay with those push to open equipment bays we'll have a look at in a second. It's got a power distribution board actually inside. By default it came with one XT60 soldered in, but it can have up to 3 inside. So if you wanted to, you could plug your batteries in parallel to give you much longer flight times. And mine came pretty much all assembled, which was a bit of a surprise because I was expecting there to be a little bit more work to do, particularly after reading the manual. But I think the manual is written for the kit version where it all comes in separate parts, and there's probably a little bit more building required. So let's talk a little bit about how this comes in the box. I'm pretty impressed with how this arrived, because as you open the box, rather than have all the components just kind of bouncing around by the side of each other, the way it works is inside this main box are 3 separate boxes that actually hold all the pieces. The way it's packed really shows some thought. So if I just take these boxes out, particularly like the way there's a little ribbon on the bottom one, feels like you're getting a present. then what we can do is we'll open each of these 3 boxes in turn to see what's inside. So the smaller box has the middle pod, comes pre-assembled in the PMP version with all the pieces that you actually need. The ESC is in there, the power distribution board is all soldered up. We also get the motor mount with the motor, again all built, you're just going to have to glue that in. We get a strap for the GoPro style camera, so that's the smaller box. Inside the larger box we have a lot of room in here. We have the ends for the wings, kind of the winglets, along with the screws to pop them on. We have the covers that go underneath the wing itself, and we also have a little extra piece of foam that goes in front of the motor, and then we have the elevons themselves, which are kind of balsa covered pieces with the carbon fiber control rods that you're going to have to glue in as well. In the big box you have the 2 wings that are going to go onto each side of that battery bay piece that we've just had a look at. On the top you can see loads of cutouts. One of the wings has the space for the FPV camera, the other wing has the space for the GoPro. The servos are installed, lovely thick rods going back to the control surfaces at the back. There's a pod each side that you can put flight controller, GPS unit, FPV gear, telemetry, whatever you want in there as well. And further out in the wings there are lots of bays to fit all of the pieces. Now, to put this thing together isn't particularly tricky, but you are going to have to get your hands on a couple of things. There aren't any glues or tapes or anything that come as part of the kit. I'd recommend you get your hands on some blue painter's tape. That's going to help keep the pieces together while the glue is setting. I personally used a lot of 5-minute epoxy. I'm using the Gorilla Glue version, but lots of different types about. That seemed to be a nice compromise, allowed me to get the glue on all the surfaces that were going to go together and to set it up. Also handy to have some nice thin CA glue, particularly for doing the fine work and making sure that all of the spars are put together. Unfortunately in mine it looked like my center pod had taken a little bit of hit in shipping and the end of one of the spars was actually broken, so it was handy to have the thin super glue just to glue that back in place before I put the wing back together. You're also going to need some 3M tape. It talks about the tape in the manual to connect the elevons onto the wing surfaces. Now you do have to be a little bit careful with tape hinges. Tape hinges are wonderfully flexible, and if you've never built a wing before with tape hinges, particularly with this style of wing, you'll be surprised at how well they work. But just a word of caution, particularly in cold or wet weather, if moisture gets underneath that tape or it's particularly cold, tape hinges don't work really great. So if you're going to fly this thing in really wet or very cold conditions, I'd probably look at using a more traditional hinge solution. So to put this thing together, the first thing we're going to do is we're actually going to get a little bit of sandpaper and rub down all the surfaces that are going to be glued together, just to give a good key for the glue to hold on to, and also to make sure that any mold release agent or any of that gubbins isn't going to interfere with the glue being able to stick nicely onto everything else. Now the way it goes together, I'd recommend just doing a test fit before you start gluing pieces. Make sure that you're completely happy. I did one and got everything together. I found the end of the big carbon fiber that goes through the rear part of the wing was a bit tricky to get in, so I also had to just run the edges of that over sandpaper just to chamfer the end, just to help it locate, because it's quite a snug fit. So the first thing to do then is, on that square rear carbon rod, is find yourself the little piece of square balsa wood, find where the middle of the rod is, and then just dab a super glue just to find where the middle is, because that's going to sit in between the 2 wing halves. Covered one half of the rod in a bit of glue and slid that home into the wing, so that should stay where it's put. Second part then is to start gluing the central pod into the wings as well. Again, make sure that you're using lots of glue, apply it reasonably liberally, make sure that you've double checked how everything is going to go together. This isn't a wing that's designed to come apart once you've built it. Once this thing is together, then that's how it's going to be forever. I personally recommend popping off the polycarbonate cover that goes over the top, just to make sure that you don't get any gluey fingerprints or accidentally get glue on it and maybe stick it down. There's only a couple of screws at the bottom that if you unscrew them, the whole thing comes off. So personally, I'd recommend doing that. Once you have covered it and pushed it all together, then I'd recommend using blue painter's tape just to keep all the faces nicely mated together while the epoxy sets up. Once you've done one wing, then you can do exactly the same to the other side. I found personally putting the glue on the wing and then pushing the wing over the central section was slightly easier. The underneath of the pod, there's actually interlocking pieces that go around the very front of the bolster of the pod, so you need to pull that little bit down, but once that's in place, everything should be good. Again, loads of blue painter's tape and kind of left that overnight to go completely off. Next job, now the two wings are together, is we can pop the motor mount on. Now the motor mount with mine already has the motor installed, so I'm going to install the thing in one go. Again, using 5-minute epoxy, making sure that there's a nice thin covering on all of the surfaces that are going to touch, and then pushing that into place. Again, using a little bit of blue painter's tape just to make sure that it doesn't move while everything is setting up. The nice thing is, with the motor installed, the weight of that nice big motor does kind of keep it pressed into the back so that you have a good pressure to make sure that everything's going to set up. Once those bits are done, I'd personally reinstall the opening and closing hardcover with the 2 couple of screws, and it's time to install the elevons. Now I'm using 3M Blenderm Hinge tape here. I've never used this before. It's something that's recommended in the manual, but it works really well, so it's probably something I'm going to use on other wings. Be very careful about making sure that the elevons are the right way around. There's a left one and a right one, and they're not marked up. So you want to make it so that the chamfered part of the elevon is in the right position to allow the elevon to drop. So put your Blenderm tape on the chamfered underside of the elevon, pop it onto the wing, and then very carefully run your fingers along and make sure that it is fitted well. Take your time with this. You want the tape hinge to be nice and solid, and you want both sides to be the same. Once you have done that, then fold the elevon down. Make sure that the elevon is butted up against the back of the wing, and then put another piece of Blenderm tape or something similar over the top to keep it in place. I then trimmed the edges with a nice sharp knife, and it was good to go. Next job then was to install the control horns. You're going to have to use a very sharp knife and cut the covering that's on the balsa elevons to let these things slide in. Again, I personally just used a little bit of sandpaper just to rough it up slightly, make sure there was no release agent on them, a little bit of super glue, and then push them home. And I found that I had to open both the top and bottom sides because the elevons were slightly too deep, so they do pop out the bottom, and rather than cut the elevons, I wanted to have them popping out underneath. Then it's a case of putting the elevon servos on. Because mine are pre-installed, the 90 degrees look pretty good. You can just rotate the endings. These are nice strong metal clips here, and I found that something like a little screwdriver is good for just popping the lock and allowing you to push them over the control horns. Last thing to do then is attach the winglets. Although they are symmetrical the way they are cut, they are not drilled symmetrically, so just double check that you're going to install them with the deeper side of the winglets at the bottom of the wing, and they're going to screw into the balsa plate that is glued into the end of the wing. I haven't used any glue on these. These are probably going to take quite a bit of abuse in landings and stuff, so I want to be able to replace them with something else. So rather than glue them, I want to just be able to undo those 2 screws and pop them off. Talks in the manual about electronics installation. I'll refer to this when I do my iNav build, and in the manual it talks about what the travel range should be and also what the expo would be too. But before I get into all of the detail in here in the manual about how you set it up, we've got the central gravity in here, the suggested settings for your GoPro session, which is all nice. Let me talk a little bit about what my thoughts here are potentially putting iNav on this thing as well. Now, when I come to build this wing out and start putting the electronics in, I'm going to have to try and keep the battery bay as free as I can. And I'm going to have to end up putting electronics on both sides of the battery bay, so potentially run cables behind the battery bay, right underneath and around where the ESC is going to be. Now that is not perfect, so I'm potentially thinking of using some cables with some kind of covering on, maybe Cat5 cables or shielded USB cables to provide the runs from one side of the model to the other. So it is going to have to require a little bit of thought to minimize the amount of cables running around inside this thing. I do want to keep the receiver, FPV gear and the GPS as far apart as I possibly can. There's already a hole cut in the right hand wing for a FPV transmitter and the FPV antenna, so that makes sense for it to pop over there, but then that probably means that the GPS has to be on the other side of the wing, and I need to have a think about whether or not I want to mount it inside the foam pointing up. A thin layer of foam shouldn't particularly stop it from working well, but I'm going to have to think about that too. The other thing that's going to be a little bit interesting is I do want to be able to measure the power consumption and the battery voltage in the OSD as part of a build with iNav. So I am going to have to route the power from the battery through the flight controller to come back out into the ESC. So that's going to require a little bit of work as well. So I'm probably going to end up unsoldering some of the PDB stuff that's come pre-done from TBS. And the last thing I'll comment on this slide is that installing iNav in this wing shouldn't be a problem, although lots of flight controllers don't like being too far away from the central gravity, and the flight controller in this is going to be at least 2 or 3 inches away out in the wing. From the testing that I've done here, and also speaking to the iNav development team, they've actually flown wings where they've mounted the flight controller right on the tip of the wing, and it's worked beautifully. So we shouldn't have to worry too much about the fact that the flight controller is away from the central gravity, so that's going to make it easier too. So in summary, what do I think? Well, I'm impressed by how quick and easy the build was. Apart from the couple of days it took me to wait for the 3M tape to arrive, I didn't realise I needed that. The build was done in a couple of hours. Most of the time was actually spent waiting for the epoxy to go off. It has a huge battery bay, so you could put one big battery in here, or you could put several batteries together side by side and plug them in parallel. There's loads of room in here for the flight controller, video transmitter, receiver antennas. I love these little bays that you press to click open. Loads of room in there for receivers, flight controllers, VTX kit. So I'm not worried that I'm going to run out of space. The smart camera locations on each side of the nozzles are cute. They hopefully aren't going to be the first thing that hits the ground in the event of a crash. And the build quality and features are very good, but then you'd expect that from Team Black Sheep. Their stuff tends to be pretty well thought out and put together. The last thing I'll say here is it's not crazy expensive. And what I mean by that is if you compare this with some of the other high-end wings that are about, or if you have built a long-range wing yourself, then you'll have probably spent at least this kind of money, if not more, just getting it ready to fly. Of course, this isn't laminated, and you could laminate it if you wanted it to be more durable, but for those of you that are into bigger wings, $250 isn't going to sound too crazy. However, if you're coming at this from the ZOHD Orbit world, where you're talking about a 70, 80 pound wing, then that's going to seem very expensive indeed. But hopefully by watching this video, you've got a better idea of what the differentiation with this wing versus those other wings is. Couple of considerations. This is quite a solid heavy wing. A 1.4 kilogram wing is going to fly very, very well. It's going to have lots of penetration. This is a pretty big wing with pretty low wing loading, so it should fly good. You do need extra pieces. You need a couple of lots of tape and a couple of lots of glue. So you're going to do super glue and some kind of epoxy. You're going to need some blue painter tape and that 3M tape to put it all together. And again, just be careful of tape pinches. They won't like really wet or very cold weather. So if you're going to be using it a lot in that, then potentially think of using a more traditional Hinge solution. But hopefully that's been useful for those of you that have been looking at the TBS Caipirinha 2 wing and be wondering about what it is and how it works, and what you need to think about if you're going to put it together. And now you can make an informed choice before going to buy one. If you found that video useful or like the content, then please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to go the extra step, you can become a Patreon of the Painless 360 channel and help provide support for what I do here. All the videos created here are put into playlists, so if you're interested in a particular topic, have a look at the playlist, and they all are organised in there to make them easier to use. If you're not sure if there's a video for your particular problem or topic you want to know more about, then add Painless 360 to the Google search term that you're interested in, and that should find the video, article or content about the particular thing that you're interested in having a look at.